welcome to the Friendships That Flourish podcast, where we dive into the intricacies of building and nurturing meaningful connections that stand the test of time. I am your host and friend, Regina Nicole. Today we have Yardley Vashon on the couch with us, and we're going to be discussing the power of forgiveness in friendship. Welcome, Yardley Vashon.
Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for agreeing to do this. I'm super excited. Yardley Vashon is an aspiring up-and-coming author, mother, friend, and one of my favorite human beings on this earth. And so I'm super excited to have you here.
Thank you.
So let's get into it. One of the things that I like to talk about when we get started is, what does it mean to you to have a friendship that is flourishing?
Okay. To me, first of all, oftentimes I look at friends like family. Sometimes I'm closer to my friends than I'm even to some, family.
Right.
So a friendship that's flourishing to me is a friendship that has complete honesty, guard completely down.
Okay.
That's important to me, to be in relationally in friendships that I don't have to have a guard up.
Okay.
Friendships that allow you to just completely be yourself, the good, the bad, indifferent, that you can just be who you are without feeling like being judged or whatever's going on. I don't, that may be something that leaves our circle, so to speak,
Yeah.
So friendships that flourish just mean to me that we're healthy, two healthy people building a healthy friendship, and I just mean that on a mental, spiritual aspect, all those things,
Okay.
So. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I always share one as well. And earlier we were talking about this same question, and the young lady we were talking to, she mentioned intentionality. And so being intentional, it makes me think about when you say complete honesty. And so you got to be intentional with it yourself so that you can be honest about, just how you move in a friendship. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So today's topic, we're going to talk about, forgiveness and friendships and what that looks like. And so let's start with what is forgiveness?
Forgiveness to me is not necessarily taking away or negating what someone has done or something that has happened, but removing the anger and the offense from it. Forgiveness allows me, or removing the anger or being offended by something allows me to be able to see it from both sides.
Okay.
Not just what the person may have done to me that may have, caused that offense to occur. That's something I've learned, So forgiveness to me just looks like, okay, this happened, but how do we grow from it? How do we learn from it?
Right.
How do we move on from it? How do we create a space where we understand that shouldn't happen? And also a space that feels safe for me to be able to share with you how it made me feel.
Right.
So that we can grow from it, because oftentimes it's hard to express that, articulate what you felt. You're feeling something, but you don't know how to always articulate it. And then there's always the aspect of that person's opinion or feeling about it,
Right.
So in respect to actual forgiveness is just removing all the anger, removing all of the offense, and actually just being able to talk and communication and, and being able to just grow from that point. What are we going to grow from this? Not just, well, you did this to me and it made me feel this way. That's important to express, but to me, it's about the evolution of it. Like, how do we evolve from this space?
Right. That's good. Something you mentioned about, one of the points you said was how do we make sure that this doesn't happen again?
Right.
And I think that is that can be challenging, that little piece, right? We forgive, we have the conversation, we talk through all of the things. And so I want us to come back to that. I hope I don't forget, but I want us to come back to what happens when it does occur again.
I have a story.
So okay.
I do.
And so that's good. When I think about forgiveness, I was telling someone, forgiveness, oftentimes what we talk about is how it is for us, not necessarily the other person. And when I sit in that, I'm like, forgiveness at some point is for all
Both,
parties.
right.
However, I guess the approach to forgiveness a lot of times is for the person who essentially did not commit the offense, because we are trying to navigate and decide, how do I move forward? What does that look like? Can I do it? Is it worth it? Like, it's all of these things. So that is like one of the things I'm like, okay, forgiveness within myself. I often say, when we are able to grace ourselves with forgiveness internally, then we're able to navigate that differently. I won't say better, but I'll say we navigate it differently within our friendships, with whatever that looks like,
right.
So.
Well, I just feel like there's levels to the forgiveness, because when I hear you say that, I think about my life and how I've chosen to forgive people. Forgiveness doesn't always mean you're going to continue on with that relationship.
For sure.
Right?
I agree.
So, because I do believe forgiveness is for both parties, but oftentimes there are situations where I have to have forgiveness for that person so that I can grow. It has nothing to do with them.
For sure.
And then there is the aspect of forgiveness that does include that other person. But so there's levels, and I say that to mean that for my own self, I have to decide how I want this forgiveness to operate in my life, whether it's just forgiveness so that I can let go of the offense and the anger and move forward with me, because a lot of times things that have hurt me over the course of my life, I've held on to for so long. And please don't cry. Oh my God. But
it's okay.
Wow, I did not know that. When I think about forgiving my father, I don't have a relationship with him, and I don't choose to. But I'm learning to forgive the things that have happened so that I can do my best to move forward.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
But then I also have the aspect of forgiveness for friendship, which is what we're talking about, so that I can move forward in that friendship and continue that relationship. So that's why I feel like there's different levels of that forgiveness.
Yeah.
So
to your point, do you think that there's a correlation between, like, because we're talking about friendships today, do you think there's a correlation between navigating forgiveness and friendship and then it helping in other areas? Or do you think they exist like differently?
I don't think they exist differently. I do think ultimately it ties in. Forgiveness as a whole is important for growth, period. Right? So I feel like forgiving, friendships and things like that, I think it just matters the relationship with the person. Like that to me is what really matters. How do I choose when I decide or when I come to the conclusion that the forgiveness is necessary? How I move or handle that forgiveness is based on the relationship that I had or have with the person. Yeah. I hope that answers the question, because I don't think it necessarily is separated or stands. It is different for different people depending on the relationship. But I think it all does still tie into how you grow.
Yeah.
Every situation, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Every situation, because I wasn't always on that level that I'm at right now of forgiveness.
That's good.
I may have been in my mind like, yeah, I forgive this person,
Right.
but did I really do the work? Because it requires work.
That's good.
Absolute work.
Forgiveness required. Yeah.
Exactly.
Like to let go, like you mentioned.
Yes.
To being able to let go, not hold grudges and that type of thing. No, that's good. I often think about that, we're talking about friendship, but I often think about, like, how does this impact other areas of our
Of our
life.
lives.
And for some people it may, for others
Mm-hmm.
it may,
Mm-hmm.
it may not.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I asked that
No,
question.
and if I could just add to that,
Yeah.
I agree wholeheartedly that it does impact other areas, because the minute that I really understood what forgiveness was, not just my own saying forgiveness, when I really understood what I believe it is, it helped me grow in such a great way that it even allowed me to um, interact with people that I wouldn't normally interact with because of maybe something they said or maybe something they did. I'm holding on to that offense. When I realized that forgiveness is about removing the anger and the offense, that allowed me to grow in a different way in
Yeah.
dealing with just having relationships with people on whatever level it is.
Right. And being okay with
And
that.
being okay with it, being comfortable with it, and being safe with it. Because my biggest thing in my life is having the safe space, not feeling guarded, and being at peace. So every situation that I encounter, when I come into that situation, I want to feel measured. I don't want to feel out of sorts or unstable or shaken, by that. So sometimes forgiveness in any area is necessary. It may not even be a friend
For
or a
sure.
family member, or, it could just be a coworker that I'm having a relationship with.
Yeah, that's good. Those are some good points. So let's talk about a time where maybe an offense happened and you decided to. I want to start with the opposite first.
Okay.
So let's go here. So let's talk about a time where you decided to forgive a person. Mm-hmm. So let's kind of talk about, if you don't mind sharing the story, and then kind of like what led you to that decision, so that we can understand and the listeners can understand, like, okay, this whole process of forgiveness.
Okay. So specifically with a friend that I have been friends with for maybe 10 years now.
Okay.
We were one of those fast friends, like we met and we were instant friends, like hanging out. So there was never always not always the conversation about things that really would bother us, or, so we had this incident that occurred where I have a daughter who is grown, and I'm very connected with my daughter in a way that if, say, she goes out or whatever, she's communicating with me because I'm that mom. Like, hey, let me know what's going on. Where are you? Whatever. So we're communicating. And that when she went away to college, a friend of mine had an issue with the fact that I communicate with my daughter like that. I'm like, well, she's a young female. She's by herself in another state.
Right.
Those type of things. So I was explaining that, but that friend of mine got super offended. Like, she's grown. You don't need to, check on her, that kind of thing.
Right.
And I'm like, well, hey, this is an area that we don't even need to talk about.
Right.
Because this is my daughter. This is the relationship that I have with my daughter. So, it kind of got, I wouldn't say, well, yeah, it kind of got heated, that conversation, excuse me, between her and I. And at that point, that was the first incident that happened. She was very opinionated about the fact that I had this type of relationship with my daughter. And I explained to her, hey, that's a boundary we don't even need to cross, So we had that incident, and then moved forward to more recently. My daughter went out on a date, and it was her first date. You know what I'm saying? And I was just like, hey, communicating. And I happened to share with my friend.
The same friend.
The same friend. Okay. Yes, sorry. We're talking about the same friend. I happened to share with my friend just a joke that because my daughter was communicating with myself and her best friend in a group text.
Okay.
Yes. So I was just, just happened to be talking to her about the text and, just explaining to her or giving her something funny from the text. Instead of her receiving what I was saying about the text, she immediately went into being upset. And that's the best way I can describe it, because she had such a strong opinion. Why are they on a date? Is it daylight? And, why is she texting you while she's on her date? And I said, whoa. This is, again, an area that we don't, need to. Right. So it kind of got out of hand before, like, the argument got out of hand between me and her about it, before I could even draw it back in or stop it or whatever. Right. And literally in the middle of me telling her this situation or explaining to her what was in this text, she cut me off and went into that whole spiel about, is she on a date? Is she grown? Is it daylight? If I was on a date with her, I would be offended by her texting. I'm like, you don't even know all the specifics,
Right.
So that kind of was a weird interaction with us in the middle of the floor at work
Oh, wow.
around other people. And I
People.
felt very irritated by her,
Mm.
saying these things. And so I text her versus continuing to go back and forth about
Okay.
it. And I basically just said, paraphrasing because I can't remember every word, but, I'm like, hey, I was just sharing something with you. I feel, like your opinion is not needed in this situation. I wasn't asking you what you thought about me and my daughter sharing,
Mhm.
and I said, I used the word, I wish I could remember it. I think I said something like, it was annoying that you
Mm.
did that, the word annoying.
Annoying.
And I think that's the only word she
Saw.
heard and saw.
Yeah.
And so she went on and on and on texting me just some of the some of the meanest things, just saying all these words. So this basically, to get to the point, we just kept going back and forth.
Okay.
Right. And that was maybe on a Thursday. So the
Okay.
next day work, we're not speaking,
Was it
at this point,
awkward?
it was awkward.
Okay.
Right. And I remember her energy being a little more awkward than mine because I walked in, I said good morning, but it was just like not the same,
Right.
Um, and then it went on over the weekend. We were constantly back and forth with this communication through text or through email.
Oh,
And
wow.
she was being very um judgmental and
Mhm.
saying things like, you're overprotective, but it's just kind of like a whole different thing of overprotection. And I'm like, why are we even having this conversation?
Yeah.
My thing.
Like, how did
I
we
said,
get here?
how did we get here? Exactly.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, I just want you to understand that that's a boundary that we don't need to cross. We don't need to talk about it. We don't need to have a conversation about it. That's me and my daughter's relationship. Unless she has a problem with it, there's no problem.
Right.
Right. So anyway, you could tell by the text in the
Okay.
back and forth, we were not good.
Good.
We had
Okay.
even gotten to the point where, because she had gotten to the point where she was saying, you don't need to talk to me about that part of your life, meaning my daughter.
Right.
I said, I don't compartmentalize my friendships in terms of conversation or anything I'm sharing. So if I'm not going to talk to you about that, I'm not going to talk to you about anything. So honestly, just kind of moving this along, the back and forth dialogue got really bad.
Okay.
To the point where I didn't even know if we were going to move forward as friends, because
Okay.
this is an area where we've had an issue. It was
Before.
contentious before.
Right.
And so even down to the point of me saying on the last email that I sent to her, I just needed you to understand my point of view and not cross that boundary.
Boundary. Yeah.
I said, I don't know where we move from here, whatever. So at my point of view on that Sunday going into Monday, I'm like, I don't know where we are at this point.
Right.
But on my way to work, I don't know, I prayed to God and God said, hug her when you go to work.
Oh, wow.
I had no, I'm literally having a conversation with God like I'm talking to you, like, hug her.
Like,
What?
what?
Why?
Why?
I'm like, why? I don't want to hug her,
Right.
And I don't know, it was just that 25-minute drive that was like, you need to hug her, and it wouldn't leave me.
Right.
It was just very constant. And I was like, okay, God. You know what I mean? Like I was just like,
I'm gonna
all
do
right,
it.
I'm
You
gonna
don't
do
have to
it.
say it again.
I don't
Right.
know, because first of all, I didn't know how she was going to receive that because,
Right.
Obviously I didn't go into every detail, but the dialogue got really ugly,
Ugly. Yeah.
So I didn't know how she would receive it. But when I walked in, before I walked in, I made the decision to follow what God said do.
Mm.
When I walked in, I have to pass her, excuse me. When I walked in, I just put my bags down and I immediately just hugged her. And she hugged me so tight and started crying. Yeah. And I knew then that was a part of that forgiveness. There was still some work to do, I guess.
Yeah.
But it helped me and it helped her.
Yeah.
Because I've actually seen a huge transition on her part,
yeah.
And mine for that matter, even in how I communicate. Because there's oftentimes, you have friends or people who you communicate with and you may not address a thing because you're not sure, or it may be not received well,
yeah. You like overthink it in
Overthink
your
it,
mind.
exactly.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in the beginning, that was kind of that friendship.
Okay.
But I can honestly say that we have evolved so tremendously in terms of being able to, her reception of me saying things to her is so different than what it used to be.
That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, it shows growth. I think it's also important to kind of go back to, like, both of you guys were feeling something about this topic within the friendship, right? Yeah. And you both were communicating something that was kind of like going over your head with each other, because you guys were in the conversation trying to get your point
both
across.
Trying to make a point. Exactly.
You're like, I need you to, you're both asking for the same thing, but you're probably like articulating it in a way where the other person wasn't hearing it, because you're both like, no, this is what I need. You need to listen to me. And so the hug is like a pivotal point or a pivotal space where I instantly thought about, like, there's this unspoken, I'm sorry.
I think the theme is just removing, like I said, the anger and the offense. Once that was done, it was easy to move forward, because, to be honest, I didn't feel like whatever she was saying was going over my head. I didn't feel like it was necessary. You know what I mean? To me.
But even in that, right? So your idea of, like, this ain't whatever you have to say and think isn't necessary to give me. Because I only need you to listen.
Right.
And on the other side of this, she's like, as your friend, I do need to give this to you.
Yeah, I get that.
Which is a part of, like, understanding your space in a friendship, what the other person is asking, like what your ask is. And sometimes our ask is just to listen, wherein for her, she's thinking, no, this is something she wants me to. And it's probably how she has been in other spaces where I always say what I need to say. And it's like, I didn't ask you for what I just want you to listen. So I think that's kind of what I meant about, like,
going over I get that.
Space.
I think exactly. And I think for me with her, I needed her to reach a level of deference for me that she didn't have before. Because I'm like, if I've already had this conversation with you, where's the respect in that we don't need to have this conversation
again? Yeah.
Because there's nothing, if it was something that was detrimental or, harmful, of course, but it's like, you're never hearing me. Like you said, you're never hearing what I'm saying I need from you in this friendship. And so, although we didn't really sit down and fully hash out everything, I think the evolution of us being able to move forward to be super honest, because remember in the beginning I said that is what, to me, a friendship looks like that's flourishing.
Right.
The honesty level. Yeah. Because sometimes we are like, yes, that's my bestie. That's, you know what I mean?
No,
really,
you're right.
We are. We're like, we're so tight, we're so cool, but are you? Because can you really be yourself? Can you really be fully honest?
Yeah.
Have those raw conversations.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, while I do believe she is my true friend, and I do believe she cares tremendously for me, just as I care for her, there was this level or this space that was hard to address because I didn't want to offend her. And I also didn't want to have that back and forth. Do you know what I mean? Because sometimes you ever been in situations where you want to address a thing, but you might not, just because you don't want to go back and forth.
Yeah, you're like, I don't want to do this.
I don't feel like,
I don't want it to go.
Draining. Yeah. I don't know if we're really going to come to some resolution, because I have other friends that we've been that open from the very beginning. So I know any issues that I'm having or any issues that they're having, they can come and address with me and vice versa. And we can move forward in that moment, in that space. It's not like we're carrying it over. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think for some people, you get there sooner than later.
Yeah.
And I am a firm believer that a lot of that happens when it's happened internally first.
True.
And so being a person who may be more open and direct to discuss and do certain things, because that is maybe your upbringing or it is something you've been taught to do, can be quickly done. Right. Where in another person where it's like, well, we don't really address certain things. We kind of just like forgiveness for people who aren't used to addressing things. It's like, don't say anything and continue.
And keep on. Exactly.
When it's like, well, do you really forgive them? Because now you're angry and you up, like you said, the anger is still there. So you haven't really done the work to forgive. And you do it so much and then it gets convoluted because you don't even know why this thing was a thing, because you've added all these
Added is
other things.
compounding,
Yeah,
right? That's
so
true. Yeah,
that's good.
that is true though, because that's and what I said earlier that when I truly learned what forgiveness was, because that's exactly what I used to be like, based
Mhm.
on my environment, based on how I was raised. Forgiveness looked more like we just gonna act like it didn't
Yeah,
happen,
you
or
don't
we're gonna
say
ignore
anything.
it. But what meanwhile, I'm still angry
Yeah.
and let one little thing happen. Now I'm triggered.
Yeah, and if
You
you were
know,
raised in the church, it's like
hmm
forgiveness is pray about it and keep moving, not
which is completely
unpack.
contradicted
Yeah,
to
like not
yeah.
unpack how it really made you feel so
hmm
that you can get it off your
actually get it
chest and
out.
be like,
Right,
"Hey, I'm angry, not
right.
because I'm not like," and this is very minute, but it could be like, "I'm mad at my sister for eating my leftovers."
hmm
When everyone knows I don't like leftovers. I'm not mad. It's the
It's the
principle
principle
behind
of the
it. You
fact you
didn't
just
say, yeah, you
right,
didn't say anything.
right.
You
It's
know I don't want the leftovers.
disrespectful,
So just
especially my
say it. Like, hey,
food.
Regina, I'm gonna eat your leftovers, as opposed
Right,
to just doing it. Because at the end of the day, whether I eat it or not, it's
it's
mine.
yours.
So the
Yeah,
principle isn't that you ate it. The problem is you didn't say anything,
right,
because
right,
this might be the one time I actually wanted my leftovers. You know what I mean? And so the other
right.
person, my sister or whomever, could have been
hmm
like, well, you're not going to eat it anyway. It doesn't matter. It's still
It's
mine.
still
Until I
yours.
have
That's
released
true.
it to someone else, it still belongs to me.
hmm
And somebody may say, well, that's very no, but that's how it starts. So it starts from you ate my leftovers.
hmm
Then it goes into I was sleeping, you drove my car
hmm
without
hmm
asking.
hmm
Then it goes from, well, I don't say
Or you move
anything.
my item,
Yeah.
it's gonna be something that minute
Yeah. And
because
it's
it's
like, yeah.
triggering.
Or it's like, I let you borrow a shirt, you never gave it back,
Right.
or whatever it
The level
is.
of respect.
So yeah, so that's good.
hmm
So let me ask you this.
hmm
Have you ever have you ever been in a situation where you well, let me go back. So you guys had this kind of aha moment where you guys embrace each other, and that
hmm
has helped.
Yeah.
Like whatever happened in that, and after that, you guys have now come to a space where you can maybe even talk about this topic, but the
hmm
friend is able to offer what you need.
hmm
Um, and how has that been? Like just moving forward, was it like an instant thing where you guys were able to get back on track, or did it take some time to where it was like, I don't mention anything right now?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. When I think about it, I know that the anger and the hurt was removed instantly. That
Okay,
part was instant.
that's good.
I don't think that the growth was well, growth is growth. It takes it's an ever
Mm-hmm.
evolving thing, so it's never really instant. Well, it could be, I guess, but in this situation, I could see. I'm going to speak for me. I could see that it was a gradual
Mm.
process.
Okay.
I think I had to just see where she was in a sense of because remember I said she had stated to me, "Don't share that part of your life with
Right.
me."
With me. Yeah.
That in itself offended me.
Yeah.
But I had to, when I made the decision to forgive and to continue to grow with this person,
Mm-hmm.
figure out whether I was going to share because I had stopped sharing everything,
Everything.
right?
Based off of her saying, don't share this.
Right. I'm like, I'm not compartmentalizing this. I'm
Mm.
going to either not share my life
Right.
with my friend or I'm going to be able to share whatever I feel like I want to share.
So do you feel
So,
like, don't lose your thought, but do you feel like having a request or ask from a friend that says, don't share this, but everything else, yes. Do you feel like that impacts the friendship? And is that why you're like, I'm not compartmentalizing my friendships? Or do you feel like there's a level of like respect, or like this is your ask, this is what you need?
what I felt like it was a form of control. I
Okay.
felt like she was trying to control me because she wasn't able to do what she wanted to do, to be
Oh.
honest.
No, I want you to be
No, no,
honest.
I'm saying,
Like I
I'm
like
just like,
this.
I
I
hadn't even
like
really
this
thought.
perspective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it was just a form of control. I feel like because she wasn't able to give her opinion, again,
Right.
because this
So
is
that's what I was gonna
just about
say.
opinion. Now, if she came to me with a true concern,
Correct.
you understand, I would be very open to it because I'm just that kind of person,
Right.
But
Okay. So it
because
was
we had
more like
already
a
had this conversation and I
yeah.
said, this is just the relationship between my daughter that we have established, as an adult, as a parent to an adult, because, there's a whole transition with that.
Right.
So as a parent to an adult, we had to transition to see what that looks like, because she's out in the world, she's traveling on her own. I'm her mom. She doesn't have,
Yeah.
well, she has other people, but you know what I mean. So that's already an area that I was pretty definitive about. I
Right.
didn't need that feedback. I'd never asked, do you think this is okay? I never gave her that impression. So that was already one thing where we had a small argument or place of contention.
Right.
And then you did it again, knowing that that's already something I'm not looking for any,
Right.
So when I said what I said to her, I think that was just a form of being able to try to control,
Yeah. Like if you can't if I can't offer feedback, don't say
then
nothing.
don't say anything. If I can't have an
Okay.
opinion, why can't you just listen to me tell you something without and let me be clear. I said to her, you can have an opinion about it. It's okay.
Right.
I have no problem with you having an opinion about it, but I don't need your feedback unless I'm soliciting it on that area.
Yeah. Okay.
So again, I should be able to just share whatever without you feeling like, because you can't speak or tell me how to be with my daughter, that you have to have something to say. Right. So I just was like, we don't, and I'll take ownership too, that me saying, well, I'm just not going to share anything, was probably out of my offense for the fact that you tried to put that control on
and
me.
a control that then puts another guard.
Exactly.
Because it's like, well, if you can't do what I've asked, then I'm going to do it this differently.
Exactly.
So, I mean, that's good though, for you to be like, hey, I can take ownership that this is, this is how I'm trying to protect me.
Right.
And this is what my ask is of you. So that's good. Have you ever been in a space where someone was warranted forgiveness, like they needed to forgive you for something?
Forgive me for something.
Yeah.
For sure.
Like that you're aware of.
That I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Yeah, my daughter.
Okay.
Like, I'm friends with people, but I'm friends with my daughter. Like we are
tight.
friends. We are. Yeah. So there have been times, and this kind of ties into the aspect of me being a parent to an adult.
Mm-hmm.
I had to transition.
Yeah.
And I had to ask her for forgiveness in the situations where I literally had to switch my brain from being that parent that
well, just being a parent and saying we are friends. And so in this situation, she's basically like, mom, friend is what I need you to be today.
Yes.
I need you to be
right,
I want to tell you something,
right.
but I need you to come with your friend hat, not your mom hat,
Right.
because I've made a decision.
Mm-hmm. And there is still that aspect of, as she's growing, when she was, going off to college and in college, that she still needed mom, where it's like, okay, mom, I don't know what to do, or, and I'm giving her advice, but I had to be very mindful of how I responded to those things, where it wasn't sound like I was, chastising or judging or even making her feel like her decision wasn't good, or, so in that respect, I had to be careful of how I approach things, even if it was something she didn't necessarily come to me about, and I saw that I felt concerned about. I would have to be very mindful of how. Well, let me just back up. In the beginning, I wasn't mindful. That's why I had to add the forgiveness, because I may approach it in a way that made her feel like, well, you're treating me like I'm a kid still.
Right.
Did
it take you a long time to make the shift?
I think it was, you just kind of like,
you like, hey, we in here. I got to do it.
Well, no, I mean, it didn't take me a long time. I wouldn't necessarily say that, but I think it was just a growing thing. It wasn't instant.
And something that you're constantly learning.
Right. And then I will accredit this to my daughter, that she was like, hey, she pushed back, respectfully.
Yeah.
She pushed back. And I was like, you know what? Okay. So there were things that have happened even more recently. I mean, she's almost 30, and we had an argument, and it got out of control or it went away that I didn't even know or see happening. And same for her. And we both had to sit down and talk, and the forgiveness was with both of us in that moment,
That's
it was very powerful. And, I always tell her she raised me well, because I mean, like, being a young mom, I was like 20, 21 years old. Having her is like, I'm learning. All parents, learn as they go, but I just was still trying to grow up myself, know. So I always tease her and say, you were raising me well, or you raised me well, something like that. But with her, there are just things, because as a parent, sometimes we have that mindset, I'm the parent, you need to listen to me or do what I say. So, she has helped me grow in that area.
That's good.
Yeah, she has really helped me grow.
I don't think we ever hear people talk about how another person has helped them grow. And outside of therapy, potentially.
Yeah.
So that's good. So I want to go back for a second to, because you and your daughter, you've known her your whole life. Now, it wasn't until like this transition from like college to like full womanhood or whatever that there has been this time span of your experience with forgiveness at another level or a different notch in life, right? With the friend who you guys were friends for like 10 plus years that we talked about, would you say that in other spaces that there's a time limit to forgiveness? Do you feel like, because like in this case, you're like, there's a space where you're like, we've talked about this once. We shouldn't be revisiting this, but you did. Right, and you decided to forgive her and you guys are doing well. So do you feel like, because I know for some people, they're like, this happened, we're one and we're done. And it's like, y'all been friends for 30 years and one situation. And I'm not saying every situation is the same.
Of course, yeah.
But in terms of time, do you think that there is a cutoff or there's like
a cutoff for forgiveness or a cutoff for you to correct yourself in that friendship?
No, for forgiveness, like, like, hey, if your friend was to do it a third time, is that the third time? Is it like,
so after we've already gone through this and
or even, so in your case, y'all went through it twice. In someone else's case, it could be one time and they're like, we're done. So
I just feel like, okay, so the forgiveness aspect is, like we said earlier, for both of us. So while I can remove the anger, I can remove the offense and, still care about you. But if you continue to do the same things that we've clearly talked about, that's unhealthy to keep moving forward, I think. Yeah. Like I mentioned before, it requires two healthy individuals to have a healthy relationship. Yeah. And that's any area, spouse, friendships, family members, whatever. So that means, like you mentioned earlier, to do the inner work. So if I've pointed out to you the thing that bothers me or something that bothers me that you do, because be clear, that's a situation that happened, but this is sometimes how people naturally operate, being very opinionated about things. So that change wasn't just about you not speaking about my daughter and the relationship between me and my daughter in respect to her checking in with me. That behavior has to change across the board.
So this is is important that is an isolated, like this is an incident, but this is this is not an isolated behavior. Right. So this is like a behavior trait that you've seen that show up in other spaces. Correct. Exactly. Okay. That's good.
Yeah. So that behavior had to be adjusted, because I am very much the type of person that I'm very selective about who I share my time with.
Yeah.
As you know, I like to spend my time alone. I'm very much an ambivert. I'm very much outgoing, but I'm also like introverted as well.
No, I get it. Yeah.
So I'm very particular, very selective about who I share my time with and who I will allow my guard to be down with. So I think that I wouldn't say there's a time limit or a situational, how many times this can happen.
Right.
Well, maybe. I'm going to double back on that. But what I think more so is that when we communicate about it, because I'm a huge communicator. I'm very communicative. So it's important for me to hear you, but also for you to hear me.
Yeah.
And there's adjustment and change on everybody. It's not because obviously me coming to you to address a thing doesn't mean that you won't have something that you need to address me with or about. So I think that it all depends on how we handle it going forward, whether it'll put a time limit or a cap on it, Hopefully that's answering your question.
No, it does.
But I just think that it's situational. I think that it matters how we handle ourselves going forward. And it's not just, okay, I'm adjust right now because this is a new situation.
Right.
I'm paying attention to how you're conducting yourself, not even just with me.
With other people, yeah.
With other people.
And it takes intentionality.
Because that truly It does.
Yeah.
Intentionality, exactly, because that truly represents to me whether there's true change.
Yeah.
Not that you're just mindful with me.
Me. But yeah, every other, yeah. And
Exactly.
so, and then to your point, I think about like how that then influences the strengthening of the friendship
Mm-hmm.
as well as the longevity.
Right.
Because again, like you said, this isn't just one incident that has caused this friendship to dissolve.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important for people to know that these are behavioral
Exactly.
things that are
Mm-hmm.
happening that then shows up in an incident.
Right. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah,
'cause-
right. So like a person being very
Mhm.
opinionated about someone else's life and how they should do things, it isn't just about you should budget your money. No, this is you being very boisterous and opinionated without regard
Mm-hmm.
about everything.
Yeah.
Like you're the other person and not you, but a person could be so focused on getting their point across
Exactly.
that they don't
That they never
consider.
hear you.
And I'm not
Exactly.
saying to not say anything. I'm saying deliver it to
Mhm.
me in a way that is going to be beneficial.
Right.
Reception for like the way that I receive a lot is going to be on me, right? Because I could exist in a friendship and be like, oh my gosh, you know, every time you come to me, you are like telling me I need to change something.
Mhm.
Well, some of the way that I view that and receive that is going to be on how I view myself.
Exactly.
And how I see you as my friend. Because if I've not articulated to you like, hey, when you come to me, sometimes I feel like you're being hard on me, and we kind of unpack that. That's different from I don't ever say anything. So I think it's important. That was a like ding 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 for me to like, these aren't just isolated events. Like these are multiple events where this one behavior keeps showing up.
Yeah.
And that's important for people to hear so that we can all kind of check ourselves like, okay,
Yeah,
what's the behavior that I'm having to where this shows up differently. I think for me, I've had a situation where I've had to ask for forgiveness before. And one of the ways for me and this friendship that we were able to move forward is to kind of like redefine what we needed.
Okay.
Like sometimes in friendships, like you mentioned earlier, like you become friends so fast, you start spending all this time together and you never really, and I hadn't done it until I read this book about like how there should be conversations about what you need in the friendship.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't know.
That's true.
And you have to give space for that. But in other spaces, it's like being able to redefine what that looks like. So like if I had a kid and we spent every day together and for the next whatever, I can't go out all the time, then maybe proactively on the front end being like, hey, I know I'm your girl. Friday nights is our thing. We go to first Fridays. But now that I'm getting ready to be a mom, there's this transitional period. Then first Fridays may look different. Like I'm not saying don't go, but I'm saying I won't be able to go. But if you want to come to the spot with me and the baby for a few
to hang
minutes,
out for a little bit,
yeah, because I still need to be able to articulate that, so that behavior that may come up where I'm like, okay, now I feel a way. So now the anger and I'm upset and all of these things causes me to go into a space where I'm like, what happened with you and such as? Well, she had a baby and whatever, when it's like, no, there's this period where we could have kind of had that conversation.
Yeah, you can still nurture your relationship, but it just looks different.
Yeah. And so
I think it comes with people just being more emotionally intelligent.
For sure.
Because I feel like a lot of people are not introspective, enough. They're not, like, for instance, in my situation, for the fact that she already had the I guess guideline, if you will. I don't know how else to put it right now. You already knew that was a place that we didn't need to have a conversation, but you didn't choose to go introspective and say, do I need to even share this?
Right.
What is the purpose of me, sharing this? What will I achieve from this? Because
I mean, that takes like what you say, emotional intelligence to be able to think about that in a conversation. That takes a lot of work from
work from inside
to be able to think about it, because a lot of times people are listening to react. They're not listening to like offer a space for just a person to talk. So
it takes a lot of effort on your part to really just have a more comprehensive consideration for the situation
Yeah.
versus just what I need to say or what I need to get across. How is the person possibly going to receive this, or even the way I say it?
Right.
Like I think you mentioned that earlier in respect to how it's being brought to me.
Right.
Did you even consider that?
Right. This has been good. I mean, I think some of the things that I've heard is like being able to be honest, being able to, you know, notice the behavioral traits that is causing these things to reoccur so that they can be addressed.
Right.
Removing. And removing, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just saying,
I
think those are the key factors for me personally. It's just removing the offense and the anger. I read this, I'm still reading it, a book called The Bait of Satan by John Bevere. And, I haven't finished the book yet, but just to kind of summarize it, a lot of that was so powerful for me in terms of just removing the offense.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes relationships will completely be destroyed just because I'm offended. Whether I'm right or wrong.
Yeah.
Just being offended. When you can remove that offense out of the thing or the situation, you can have a better approach and a response.
Yeah. Do you think an apology is important in that forgiveness process?
No, I think change behavior is more important than an apology. It's sort of like love and trust.
Yeah.
I'd rather trust you than love you, because love is easy. Apology is easy to say. Well, not necessarily, something depends on the people, but you can say, I'm sorry, but if there's no change behavior, it's so ineffective and it really doesn't mean anything. And that's more just you change, because she didn't, to double back to the situation, there was never an apology, by the way.
Well,
so she never apologized verbally,
right?
But her changed behavior has shown me, or at least given me a clearer understanding of there is a recognizing that it did offend me or did upset me, and I know that that's not an area that I should make a mention of, or even how I say something to you makes a difference. So that to me is more important than just saying I apologize or I'm sorry. It's just the changed behavior. And I think what happens too, if I could just add this, that oftentimes in relationships, we as people kind of say, oh, well, that person's been through that, or that person is, this is just how they are.
Right.
I'm not a proponent for that. I do not subscribe to that whatsoever.
Right. Like this is just who they are. Accept it. Yeah.
Yeah, because actually that's what she said to me in one of the back and forth dialogues. This is just who I am. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But that's not who I'm willing to accept in my life because it's toxic.
Yeah.
So we know that the traumas of our childhood or the traumas of, past situations and relationships are triggered in relationships. When you're trying to deal with people, when you're trying to have communication with people, things will trigger you and you're responding based on the trauma that you've experienced in the past.
Yeah.
But you don't have to handle me that way.
For sure.
Because I am that friend that you can come to me with anything. We can talk about anything. But if you're not willing to have that same space for me, then how do we really grow? How do we really evolve in these situations? Because I don't for a second think that something else might not come up.
Oh,
you know
for
what
sure.
I mean?
No, for sure.
But I feel like we're going to handle it differently because, So the forgiveness is crucial, especially for yourself, for the growth internally, but also in how you move forward.
Yeah. And
I also think it's important. Forgiveness is important to lead by example, to be an example to someone else.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's good. I mean, I've taken in a lot today. Like I really like about the change behavior piece, because I don't think we hear that enough.
Yeah.
Coined with forgiveness. I think we just think of like it's just to say I'm sorry or whatever, when it's like it has
forgiveness
nothing to
is not monolithic. Like it requires many levels.
Yeah. And it takes time.
Yeah.
Because when you're asking for change behavior, that is it may not happen instantly. And so then it makes me think about like all of these different things that we'll come back to. But this has been great.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'd like to do a friendship quote.
Okay.
And so I'll give you the quote and you tell me what it means to you. There's
Oh
no right or
boy.
wrong. It's just
Okay.
what, comes to mind. It says, never injure a friend, even in jest.
Never end. Never injure a friend. Okay.
Even in jest. And so jest is basically like, sometimes we'll joke at a friend and we're like,
Yeah.
oh, I was just joking. And
Absolutely.
my mom always says
There's a lot of
behind
truth in
every
a
joke.
joke.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
trying to sneak it in there.
right.
Yeah, absolutely. So what, let me see. Well, that sounds very biblical to me, honestly.
Come on.
Because I'm just thinking about, how we're supposed to handle God's people, how we're supposed to handle each other.
Yeah, for sure.
Sometimes people do say things jokingly or whatever, just to, I guess, make a laugh, or maybe to get their point across, but or maybe to just say a thing but try to do it jokingly or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think that that's a very powerful statement, because we do need to operate from a space that we're bringing no harm.
For sure.
That's one of the first laws of preservation.
Yeah. And that's important.
Do no harm, bring no harm.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's actually something that I pray about every day, because I have to constantly be mindful of me and how I'm showing up in these spaces.
For sure.
Being intentional about how I show up in my spaces, any space that I encounter, whether it's with friends, with coworkers, with my daughter, with my mom, and I have many situations where I have moved very reckless, that I've had to like go back and look at and say, okay, you handled that way wrong.
Way wrong, yeah.
And you could have handled that so much better. And I've had to apologize, for allowing myself to get out of pocket, so to speak, So with that being said, I just think that it's important for us to operate from a space of preservation. Just know that when you're dealing with people, whatever I say or how I handle you, could affect you in a major way long term.
Yeah.
Some people, you hear people, oh, I really don't care. It doesn't bother me. I just think that's such a false statement that a lot of people make, but that's the way of their way of protecting themselves.
Yeah,
absolutely,
definitely
absolutely.
A defense mechanism.
But I do wish that people would be more open to being vulnerable.
Yeah.
So with that being said, to answer your question, or to give my perspective on this quote, I think it's a great quote, because it's important for us to be mindful of how we show up in people's lives.
Yeah.
So that I'm not doing anything that will harm you, because ultimately I'm going to be harmed in that as well, whether I realize that or not.
Yeah.
Especially for somebody like me, who is super introspective, who is one of those type of people, I see it from both sides, because I have been in situations before my evolution or before my own personal growth where I have said things to offend somebody because they offended me. Right? I'm not a jabber, but I am a responder. You know what I mean? I won't start it, but I'll finish it. That's the mentality I had. But, I'm like doubling back on that mentally and spiritually, really spiritually, because God is always working on me.
For sure.
Like, because I'm so in tune, I guess, to that. But it's one of those things where I'm like, I offended that person, but now I'm sitting back hurting because I offended them.
Yeah. So
the hurt is not just to them. It's, if you just think about it, if you're kind of the person like, well, how's it going to affect me?
Yeah, that's
so good. Yeah. So I think it's important for us to address people, not just friends, but people in general, from a place of, I don't want to bring any harm in this situation.
Yeah.
There is something that needs to be addressed, and there is something that needs to be adjusted in this situation, but it doesn't have to be from a place of offense.
For sure.
Right? So just the way we approach it, I'm big on the communication, like I said earlier. So like even this last year, I started a new job back in October. And a lot of the things that I felt like I was going through at my former job, I was like, I'm going to be very intentional not to encounter these type of things. Not that you won't encounter them, but how I respond to them was important to me. And so when things were occurring, or a situation occurred, I'm like, hey, can we talk? Let's talk. Because oftentimes we're saying words, but we're not really communicating effectively. Right. So, it's important for me to let's talk it out. Let's, speak from an honest place, both of us, and be open. So that's why I say I wish people were more willing. And I'm glad I'm happy that that's something that I've worked on for myself, to be in a more vulnerable space and being comfortable with it and feeling safe.
Yeah.
Because ultimately my goal is not to harm and destroy, but to recover and grow. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again.
You're welcome.
As we conclude this episode of Friendships That Flourish, we're reminded of the value of authentic connections and how friendships enrich our lives and foster a sense of belonging. I want to encourage each of you listening to just kind of go back and reflect on the information that was shared today during our conversation, and go out there and be a better friend. Thank you guys for listening. Yardley Vashon, tell us where we can connect with you.
Really, I only have Instagram.
That works.
It's Yards, which is my little nickname that most people call me, but YARDS.trek. So that's my journey.
Okay.
And that's Yards, YARDS.TREK.
And that's on Instagram?
That's on Instagram.
Yeah. All right. And
Yards
thank you.
Trek.
Yeah. So go out there and follow Miss Yardley Vashon, and you can follow the podcast on IG and YouTube. And if you have any topics or feedback for us, make sure you email us at friendsthatflourish@gmail.com. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Friendships That Flourish, the podcast with your host, Regina Nicole. Be sure to follow us on all social media platforms, and be sure to listen to us on YouTube, Apple Music, and Spotify. Don't forget to email us any of your topics and questions at friendsthatflourish@gmail.com.